Hello everyone and welcome to Outriders New Horizon. In today's video I'm going to share with you the in-depth analysis guide with the updated version of one of the best single target DPS pyromancer build. Without using anomaly power or firepower, we're actually having max health in all our epic pieces, and this is actually one of the best builds I have found top tier to run solo Eye of the Storm. It's very easy, high survivability, extreme crowd control, very good DPS, and one of my favorite builds. So in case this is the first time you stumble upon this kind of build in my channel, you don't have to check out the other one. This is actually the improved version. I will go more in depth why we're using these mods, why they work so well, what other things I have tested and why they don't work, and why we have max health instead of firepower or anomaly power, and why this is one of the best Eye of the Storm, along with giving you a few tips. But before we start, in case you enjoy the content of the channel and you don't want to miss any upcoming videos I release throughout the week, feel free to subscribe. So without any further delay, let's just jump right into it. We're going to begin with our skills: Thermal Bomb, Ash Blast and Volcanic Rounds. This combination of skills are going to elevate the build because they have the best debuffs, and also Volcanic Rounds, they're not here to apply burn, they're basically here to boost our anomaly damage, not anomaly power. Because yes, you have guessed it, reload boost is the change I have made, in case you have seen my first video. However, Thermal Bomb and Ash Blast work extremely well for debuffing enemies at crowd controlling, so you can crowd control the whole map when you run solo or with a group, and Thermal Bomb will just apply the best debuff in the enemies. That's why we have this combination. As you can see, the damage is quite irrelevant compared to the actual damage we're going to utilize from the weapon mods. So let's have a closer look at all the armor and pieces we're using, all epic pieces with max health, cooldown reduction and status power. Because our weapon also has status power, and because only one piece, I think yes, the gloss from it doesn't have status power and have skill life leech, we're going to have 150% status power, which we need to keep the Ash longer to enemies, and we have the 9% skill life leech, which I did find the necessary threshold to survive a little easier. Let's start generally why this works very well. Weapon mod damage doesn't scale with anomaly power or firepower. It only scales with percent damage and the reload boost from the pyromancer. That being said, everything we're going to see are a percent damage increase debuffing the enemies. That's why we deal huge amounts of damage with our weapon mods, and that's why this works very well. Let's begin with our headpiece. Captain Hunter, 25% increased damage against elites. This applies to everything: anomaly power, firepower and weapon mods. That's why we're using it. One of the best damage increase mods in the game and highly recommended. Damage Absorber is here because although we have so much health, we do need to reach the threshold that we have now, the 67% around physical damage reduction. Otherwise you're getting so much damage when you run solo, and without Damage Absorber, even with nearly 50,000 health, you will have a slight problem. So let's move on to the chest piece. Fire Frenzy and Branded, pretty much self-explanatory. Two uses of Fire Frenzy and Branded will debuff the enemies to receive 40% extra damage. If you use it twice, an enemy can take 80% extra damage, so this is insane. 80% extra damage plus 25% from the Captain Hunter. We're doing a lot of extra damage against the elites while we debuff them with Branded, and that's why our mods are going to hit like a truck. But we don't stop there. We increase even further our damage with Bullet Kindling. Another 20% extra damage against enemies afflicted by burn, and extra damage applies to everything, including our weapon mods. Burn we will apply thanks to Thermal Bomb, not Volcanic Rounds, because you see we have the reload boost. This actually works very good because thanks to one of my viewers, I'm going to leave the credit here so you can see, just mentioned that reload boost increases anomaly damage, not anomaly power. That being said, anomaly damage is from the weapon mods. This is actually a huge difference 50% extra damage I have seen in my build. I was using susceptibility because, yes, while you have the volcanic rounds, the weapon mods deal slightly increased damage, 10%, 15%, but with reload boost, they deal 50% extra damage, which is quite insane. And also the anomaly damage applies to the burning and everything else that you deal with anomaly power. However, this will just apply to further increase the weapon mods. That's why this is one of the best tier 1 weapon mod, highly recommended for this build. But we have even more. We have the Ashen boost. Boost damage to enemies afflicted by Ash by another 20%. So we have a lot of percentages. I'm going to add it in the end. While we apply, for example, due to the Ash Blast, the enemies afflicted by Ash will receive an extra damage, and we have the double fund. I was contemplating to replace this, however, there are two reasons I left it. One, it's quite easier to affect the bosses and the elites, or two elites that are close by. And second, I think I've seen someone mentioning that double fun, if it hits one boss, it actually makes it for one thermal bomb to debuff them from 80% extra damage. So 80% and another 80%. I don't know if this is true. However, even if it isn't, I do prefer double fun to be able to affect two targets, and one of them being the boss or an elite. And as you can see, the gloves are the only piece I have skill life leech. And finally, for the boots, we have death sentence. So the final piece of the puzzle, anomaly damage against enemies and weapon damage is increased by 40 and 30%. So 30% extra damage and anomaly damage, not for skill damage. That applies to the weapon mods. So yeah, death sentence, one of the best debuffs. And we also have the Ash increase range, it's a must. Without this, the radius of Ash Blast is very, very dreadful. And with this, you pretty much apply to the whole almost map when you run with solo or with friends, so these are a must. And as you can see, you have debuffs that apply to other players, making this build actually a very decent option for multiplayer, because the weapon damage, the anomaly damage, and the debuff from the branding apply to everyone, not only you. So this is actually one of the best builds for solo or multiplayer. I'm going to leave behind now, you can see all the armor and mods, and we're going to move on to the weapons. So I have tested a lot of weapons. In my previous build, I was running the Daimyo because I wanted something with decent clip size and reload speed, because I was using the volcanic rounds with susceptibility, not reload boost, and because I wanted the skill life leech. Another option I was using was the Thunderbird. It has status power instead of skill life leech, and the reason I'm using either of these because Ultimate Storm Whip along with Claymore Torrent, in my opinion, is the best combination. Claymore Torrent is the best, number one, the highest DPS mod. I have tested the Shadow Comment and I didn't find very adequate, because Claymore Torrent every 2 seconds will decimate all enemies, and it will also proc Shadow Comment for no reason. And you will have to proc Claymore Torrent before Shadow Comment, and it doesn't do anything against the trash. But Ultimate Storm Whip in between can finish up trash enemies, deal massive amounts of damage to elites, and that's why I do prefer it. And especially now with reload boost, and after some testing, the Damascus offering once again reigns supreme. We have the Claymore Torrent, we have not the Shadow Comment, I have to replace it. So we have the Claymore Torrent and the Ultimate Storm Whip. Because I have tested, as I told you, the Shadow Comment, and it doesn't offer as much benefit compared to the Ultimate Storm Whip. It's viable, it's good, but Damascus offering has many other advantages. First and foremost, status power and skill leech, both of them, that we need. Second of all, 100 clip size and pretty decent RPM. We need the RPM to be able to trigger Ultimate Storm Whip as fast as we can, as well as Claymore Torrent. And the second advantage I found, because you kill enemies so fast, and because we dance between the primary and secondary weapon, you probably won't have to reload with a Damascus offering. You will activate volcanic rounds, apply a little burn, trigger reload boost, and Just when you trigger reload boost, Damascus Offering has already reloaded, and before you go to 0 bullets, you will activate volcanic rounds, replenishing the ammo in the magazine, so you don't have to reload, and we don't care that the reload time is dreadful. I have tested this and the other options, and in my opinion, the Damascus Offering is the number one choice. So moving on to the secondary weapon, as in most builds using weapon mod damage, we have to use either the guillotine or the animal shotgun to have the radiation splash and morning winds. So when you switch to this weapon, especially with a reload boost, you will deal 50% extra damage. These mods will hit for a lot, 4 or 9 million. I'm not sure, but a lot of damage. They can almost one-shot high health elites like behemoths or even brute mothers. They deal so much damage, this combination of two, which is quite insane. And you can actually time the morning winds because it has 8 seconds cooldown, and you can time it with our skills. Ash Blast has 8.6 seconds cooldown. So every time you pop a Ash Blast, you can switch up to your secondary weapon and proc morning winds. That's why you can just time it very good. Finally, let's talk about the sidearm. This is actually something I don't use. I didn't bother using, I just implemented here now for the clip combustion. This is the thing I need probably you to focus, because clip combustion is something good to proc for the Eye of the Storm and kill the annoying circles. It has 2 seconds cooldown. I usually proc my reload boost using the sidearm. That's why it's good to have the clip combustion and to be able to kill the circles when you are close by. It's not bad. The other mode, it's open to your preference, kinetic stop, although I don't bother proccing it. Clip combustion, in my opinion, is something you have to run. Have status power if you can, it's not necessary. You only proc the clip combustion to be able to just kill a few enemies or deal some extra damage, but as I told you, it's not necessary. You don't have to run this at all. So another option probably people may consider is the funeral pyre, because yeah, I know if you hip fire, it can proc multiple shadow comets and claymore torrents to decimate enemies. However, this isn't necessary for this build. You decimate enemies, one-shot them with either the ultimate storm whip or the claymore torrent, and because this is the only source of DPS, I didn't find funeral pyre to be the best if you go for solo, because you need something to keep firing, and the reload speed, as you can see in the funeral pyre, is dreadful, and we don't have the source of anything else. We don't have, for example, the thermal bomb doesn't do any damage or anything else, because yeah, the funeral pyre is better if you go for the speedrunner build that also has the overheat and has a different rotation. However, this type of build needs to keep proccing the primary weapon mods, to keep sniping some enemies around, because we don't have the best AoE compared to the speedrunner overheat build, and that's why we have to focus on the Damascus Offering or the Thunderbird or the Daimyo. But in my opinion, as I told you after some testing, the Damascus Offering is the superior option, because we probably won't have to reload, and I do like not having to reload with this build. So let's move on and have a look at the talents. I have made some tests. There are 1 or 2 flex slots, however everything else I stick by my choices. First things first, you have to go with Forge Ablaze in order to have the 6.4 seconds thermal bomb cooldown that we desperately need. The other choice to go with Wildfire, I go like this, and this is the first flex choice, the warm-up or the unquenchable. Warm-up will make us to have much smoother rotation with the volcanic rounds. They will have 12.3 seconds cooldown. Without this, they have 14.5. You still take 90% benefit of the reload boost, but with this choice you have 100% benefit from the reload boost, and you can actually use the volcanic rounds for a brief moment for a couple of seconds to apply burn before you trigger the reload boost. In case you have trouble surviving, that's the only thing you need to change for the unquenchable, because you will have 6% more skill leads, making having a 15% skill leads, and basically making you almost immortal, but having a little less damage. Let's say it's not very noticeable. I do like it as this is more consistent, but unquenchable is for those that have trouble surviving. Now, moving on to all the other skills, as you can see, we go for the Marble Orchard to reduce the cooldowns of the immobilized skills 1 and 2 in order to have the 8.6 second Ash Blast, because this actually is the ideal scenario for the death sentence, and this way you will have the death sentence 99% uptime, 8% second duration with 8.6 second cooldown is actually insane and very good. That's why we're going full on the Ashbreaker tree. Unfortunately, we have to get the Inferno weapon and Mark of the Anomaly that we don't get so much benefit, but thankfully we get Trial of the Ashes and either 10% multiplicable damage that applies to the mods for enemies afflicted by Ash, a useless, let's say, option now. This is actually the second flex slot. Conflagration scales with mod damage as I have tested. So resisted piercing will increase your weapon damage and mod damage against enemies. However, Curse of the Pompeii will increase the Ash inflicted by enemies by 50% longer. So if you go for multiplayer, I would definitely pick the Curse of the Pompeii, because although now with the 150% status power, you keep the enemies around 4 to 5 seconds afflicted by Ash. You can get Curse of the Pompeii. You can replace this with, instead of skill life leech, with status power. Get also the Unquenchable in case you have trouble surviving. Get the Curse of the Pompeii and have 180% status power plus 15% longer Ash. I think this will get us to around 6 seconds Ash to enemies, which is ridiculous. So enemies will just freeze around the map for 60% of the time and make things and survivability quite easier for the group and yourself. But personally, I go for Conflagration to increase my damage a little bit, because I don't have trouble surviving with the duration of the Ash we have now. Mark of the Anomaly, Inferno weapon, Mark of the Anomaly, unfortunately we don't get any benefit from those, but Ashes to Ashes will apply vulnerable to all enemies afflicted by Ash, and because we have so much status power, the vulnerable will stay for a very long period of time, so you basically can have it, I think, 100% of uptime. Even if the enemy goes immune to Ash, you will still have enough time to apply the vulnerable thanks to Ashes, but also thanks to the Radiation Splash. Now, Hurt Twice as Long, thankfully a very good mod, 10% extra damage against elites and 10% less damage against elites against you, so with these two we have another 25% extra damage against enemies, 15% from their vulnerable and 10% extra against elites. And we also have the Trial of the Ashes number 2, another 15% extra damage to enemies afflicted by Ash, and this applies to the weapon mods, so I'm going to do the calculations down below so you can see after we apply all the armor mods, all the debuffs and all the talents how much we have, and I think the number is going to be quite insane. So after the calculations, we actually have 225% increased damage against elites as long as they have 2 branded, and the branded stacks only once, and that's without including the damage of the reload boost. But the mods will hit 50% extra damage on top of that because of the reload boost. So the damage is insane. You lose against non-elites 35% less damage, so it's 190% extra damage against non-elites plus the reload boost. So you see why the damage is insane, why the weapon mods will hit like a truck, and why you will be able to finish off the elites and normal enemies very fast. So let's move on to some suggestions for alternate mods, only a couple of changes I can make, and also what other mods work and don't work for the build. So the one choice I like is the Circle of Power, when you face especially the summon in the Wellspring that deals huge amounts of anomaly damage and we have only 10% resistance. With this you will basically be able to fail stun him, although you may not need it. But what are you going to replace for the Circle of Power? We have to sacrifice something. And honestly, either Ashen Boost, Double Fun are the two choices I would sacrifice when I face the summon. One of the two. In my opinion, I would sacrifice Ashen Boost because I do like the Double Fun against some of the enemies. This way you will have 55% resistance against the summon and you will be able to survive very easy. The special actually can apply to Yagak in case you find yourself trouble surviving, although For some reason, Yagak isn't as dangerous, and I know the reason, because Yagak doesn't have actually so many small enemies, and the small enemies are quite dangerous. You only have the annoying guys that jump around and knock you back, but you can kill them so fast, making the Eye of the Storm quite easier compared to the Shaman. So other mods that don't work, we don't want anything that increases an anomaly power. We don't want power assimilation, for example, or something similar, because it doesn't scale with the weapon mods. And most of our damage comes from the weapon mods. The thermal bomb doesn't do as much damage as we want, even if you stack anomaly power, even if you use the reforged set, which I have did in a similar build. The damage of the thermal bomb, in case you focus everything on that, will be always third or worse. So that's why we have to focus on everything else. Now, for tier 1 mods, there isn't anything else to increase your anomaly damage or against the targets, so these are all the mods we can get. For example, you don't get so much benefit from empowerment, and there aren't anything else to increase your damage. This scales with anomaly power and it's in 5-meter radius, which don't care. This only scales with weapon damage, and everything else will either increase our anomaly power, which we don't care. So we need only to increase our damage, and this only applies to weapon damage, so we cannot use it. The only other things that could utilize were, for example, the freezing boost, the bloody boost. We could take advantage the radical therapy, or for example the best that are the tainted blood, the euthanizer, and the shatter. I think, yeah, the shatter, 25% extra damage against enemies afflicted by freeze. For example, we could take the tainted blood, and for the secondary mode, instead of ultimate storm whip, go for the ultimate bone shrapnel. This way we'll have even more damage against single target DPS. However, the ultimate bone shrapnel, as you can see, has a very bad downside. You have to go for critical shots, otherwise you won't do any damage. This is very inconsistent. I don't like to aim my weapon to go for criticals. Most of the time I want to increase my mobility, and I do prefer to hip fire the weapon. That's why I go with either ultimate storm whip or with a shadow comment as the best options that scale very well with the build we have. I have also tested, now that we're talking about weapons, what other mods I tested that don't work very well. Fortress doesn't work very well because major DPS increase is only the Claymore Torrent, and 30% on top of that, yes, it's good, but you lose a lot of the secondary weapon mode that has, for example, a 220% increased damage of the Ultimate Storm Whip. It's better to have this rather than have an extra 30% to only the Claymore Torrent. Ultimate Damage Link, yeah, doesn't work very well. Everything that is situational, it's not the best as Ultimate Storm Whip, as Ultimate Bone Shrapnel, or Deadly Disturbance that actually deals, I think, the most anomaly damage with a best cooldown, because Sandstorm is great, but it deals damage over time with a 5 seconds cooldown, which also I didn't like. I tested the String of Ghosts that has 2 seconds cooldown. I don't know the reason. It doesn't work so well compared to the Ultimate Storm Whip or even the Shadow Comment. I think it needs to lick 5 enemies in 10-meter radius and deal the electric damage to them. That's why it doesn't work very well, and it was very unimpressive during my tests. The same goes with Wrath of Moloch. You have to go for criticals, and Consecration Blast doesn't proc as often, doesn't offer so much damage, because I think this only has to proc with while you kill the enemies with a weapon and not the weapon mod. That's why it didn't proc so well. I did the full expedition and the concentration blast damage was so low, so disappointing, which wasn't good. And of course the scrap grenade and the grand opening, where is it? Yes, although they deal excellent damage, you have to reload every time to proc them. You can make, for example, a pretty decent build if you go for something to utilize that, but you don't have to, because you will have to reload, let's say 1 second, the next second proc the scrap grenade, and so on and so on. Ultimate Storm Whip, it's just easier, it just offers more damage, it's more consistent, until you just have to go with the scrap grenade and the grand opening. Yes, it can work, but I don't think it's necessary to just go over the hassle. These mods are proccing every time, you don't have to make any reload or anything else, and it's much easier. So this is Everything else, it doesn't work very well because, for example, Ultimate Anomaly Surge, I wanted to use that, but it procs on critical shots. Kinetic Stomp only procs in close range, and this build is actually a long range build. That's why I have the Ultimate Storm Whip, Shadow Comment or something else. Otherwise, the Kinetic Storm could be a superior option to both Ultimate Storm Whip and Shadow Comment. However, because we are in long range 90% of the time, I don't like the Kinetic Storm. And everything else is, as I told you, situational or doesn't work as well, except for, of course, for the Money Winds and Radiation Splash we already have in the secondary weapon. Moving on to the rotation of the build, which is actually one of the simplest one, even compared to the firepower. Now we have to know how to proc reload boost. This is actually the only crucial thing. Because we're a long range build, you don't have to waste your guillotine or anemoy shotgun, basically the Morning Winds Radiation Splash combo, to proc the reload boost. Because we always start to empty the secondary weapon to be able to reload it, but we also empty the sidearm. This way, if you, for example, need to kill enemies long range and you want to proc the reload boost, pop up volcanic rounds, switch to your sidearm, reload, switch back to your primary weapon, start proccing out the weapon mods, and when the high health enemies come nearby, switch to the secondary weapon to take advantage of the Morning Winds Radiation Splash. That being said, in case you have high health enemies, you can proc the reload boost using the guillotine, but you have to proc the rotation a little differently. You have to open with volcanic rounds, double thermal bomb, then go for Ash Blast if you have the high health enemies nearby, switch to the guillotine, proc a lot of damage with a reload boost and the Morning Winds Radiation Splash, switch to your primary weapon and start destroying everything in your vicinity, and start spamming Thermal Bomb and Ash Blast. Ash Blast, always use it on cooldown, you don't have to wait, just apply Ash and debuff the enemies. Thermal Bomb as well, debuff high health enemies. You can save it, for example, for elites and mini bosses, because honestly everything else, Ash Blast is more than enough to finish them off. However, Thermal Bomb is better for the birds, for the behemoths, for the brood mothers, and for the altered elite. There aren't many tips I should give you about this build, they're not necessary honestly. Just keep spamming your skills, Ash Blast, Thermal Bomb, and you have to manage the reload boost. This is the only thing that you have to manage with this build. To be able, as I told you, for the rotation, to keep the secondary weapon modes as they deal an insane amount of damage to elites and bosses, and you have to go close by to them, although it's not necessary. You can kill even high health enemies using the Damascus offering in long range. The guillotine dynamo shotgun is just a huge burst damage, and it's actually the best rotation to keep, for example, for the Kyagak. Now I can give you tips for the Eye of the Storm. It's one of my least favorite expedition because honestly it's easy, it's doable, however it's very boring. Because you have to, for example, to optimize time for the Eye of the Storm, you have to keep one of the mini Jefferson starships, these annoying flying things, alive. Hide yourself behind the pillar, keep using Ash Blast in case you get shot by the thing, and if one is alive, no more enemies will spawn for the first two pillars at least. After the certain spawns, after you face the Brood Mother in the first wave, and you face the crawlers in the second pillar, then there are no more enemies. Leave alive this Jefferson starship. That's why it's a little boring, but it's more the most consistent way. The third pillar is okay, you have to face a behemoth, and then always you will have to kill enemies because there are alphas and perfis and they charge you, they will try to get into the circle, so you have to kill them. Kyagak himself is not very hard. Keep applying the thermal bomb on the cooldown, keep using Ash Blast even if he's immune to crowd control, because you will apply the death sentence, and you have to save the guillotine or the animal shotgun in case you have trouble surviving against the jumping enemies. Save the secondary weapon modes as it can probably one-shot them, this along with the Ash with the death sentence. And also keep the clip combustion from the sidearm to kill the small circles, or just use your weapon mode to kill them. Don't let them alive because they deal quite decent damage, and even if you have 50,000 nearly health, you can die. You're not completely mortal. Be careful, just kill the enemies and keep focusing on your Kyagak. The damage for single target is insane. As you can see in the background, The mini boss in the wellspring, one of the most annoying. I think I kill it in around 20 seconds, the jumping one, and I think it can be done even easier. And it was the first time I ignored the other elites and focused on him because I thought if I kill him they will despawn, and spoiler alert, they don't despawn. So you won't have a problem even in Eye of the Storm, or even if you run any other expedition. There is no expedition that this build has a downside. It's actually one of the best solo and one of the best multiplayer builds. And that's why I'm going to jump now into advantages and disadvantages. The advantages: great survivability, decent AoE because of the Claymore Torrent. The Claymore Torrent is the only source of AoE actually. Apart from that, that's the only thing you lack, but great single target DPS, great burst, great debuffing for you or multiplayer. This build works excellent in multiplayer. You actually debuff 80% for the branded 1440 and another 40% weapon damage and 30% anomaly damage. So unfortunately I cannot test it in multiplayer because I had a very bad experience, lost all my resources in my Devastator. The link of the video is in the description until they fix it, because other people just experience that. I'm not joining multiplayer because I'm too scared to lose all my resources, and most important, lose the Sarge, because the resources, I care and I don't care, I can farm them, but the Sarge are a pain to farm them, especially cooldown reduction. So final conclusion, this is top tier build in my opinion, for solo, for multiplayer, in the pyromancer, very excellent, very good damage. If you want to go for a hybrid build, this is actually what it feels for a hybrid build, because you have to compromise and you don't have to go for firepower, you don't have to go to anomaly damage, so you basically shoot your weapon and technically your weapon deals most of the damage, although it's not weapon damage, it's mod damage. I do consider this a kind of hybrid build. I do like it, only with max health, you don't need anything else, and it works great. Feel free to make any changes you want to the build, although I did give you the flex slots. You can replace a double fan or Russian boost. I don't want to replace anything else because everything else works great. And you don't have to go with anomaly power or firepower, as I told you. It doesn't scale with mod damage and it's not worth it. And so that was it for today's video. I really hope this will help you create your own version of the pyromancer hybrid, I'm going to say build because I don't know how else I can call it, with max health and mod damage instead of anomaly power and firepower damage. Thank you very much for watching the video, and an extra thank you in case you stick around until the end. So feel free to stay tuned for more upcoming videos for Outriders New Horizon and other video games, and as always I wish you all a wonderful day.